This episode is brought to you by Power Monkey Camp. Now, when we talk about things like life-changing events, I have to say that Power Monkey Camp has absolutely been one of those for me, for my wife, for my family, as well as for many of our staff and coaches who continue to come back to be with us for our full week-long adult fitness camp in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. I can't believe it, but we are on our 10th year anniversary this year in 2023. We have two incredible camps lined up, one April 30th to May 6th, and then our 20th is going to be September 24th to September 30th. The spots are going quickly and we anticipate being sold out for both of them. So if you are interested, please check out powermonkeycamp.com and try to reserve one of those last spots if you want to hang out with us for that week. Now, the information is vast. You're going to be in sessions with some of the most incredible experts in their fields, learning about incredible topics and being able to dive pretty deeply, much more deeply than you would if you were in a day or a weekend session. But beyond the incredible information that's going to be top-notch, camp is an experience. It's one of those things that will change your lives. You'll meet people from around the world and become close friends and family with people that you didn't even know were in the space. I guarantee you it's going to be worth the time. And especially this being our 10-year anniversary, we have some really special things planned, and we hope that you can all be out with us. Many of those return campers who are listening right now, we can't wait to see you. And for those of you who are on the fence, please sign up. It'll be worth your time. Check out powermonkeycamp.com for more information. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn. And on today's episode, we have the incredible power couple of Kelly and Juliet Starrett. We are so lucky to have them both on with us. Individually, they are amazing, but together they create one of the more impressive power couples that we have within the industry. They are probably most well known within the CrossFit space as having been the founders and owners of one of the more successful CrossFit gyms out there, San Francisco CrossFit, which is unfortunately now closed. We talk a little bit about what went into the decision to close that down a few years ago, as well as being known for the Ready State, their incredible website, which is a resource for PT, moving better, moving more wisely. Incredible authors. Of course, Kelly is known for some of the books that he's put out into the space. And now today we are also talking about a new book that they are both bringing to the equation, Built to Move, the 10 Essential Habits to Help You Move Freely and Live Fully. We talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty that went into some of the things that they chose as being 10 essential items, how they implement them on their daily lives, and also some of the ones that are maybe a challenge for them. Always great talking with them. We hope we can get them on again in the future, but we hope you guys enjoy this one.
I love it. Well, rotational work for you guys is probably built in from your backgrounds, right? I mean, that's all you do as paddlers. Is that right? I mean, that's such a big part of your sport.
I think you bring something up because, if you're in classic strength and conditioning, especially in something like an Olympic style weightlifting program, it's easy to see the world. And there's just not a lot of rotation programmed in. How do we train rotation? How do we expose rotation? And sometimes we're like, okay, well, it just needs to be part of my GPP or my warm-ups or some aspect. I'm throwing a medicine ball. I'm doing a David Weck rope. I've just got to figure out ways of rotation. And you can see suddenly even why like the Russian landmine, staying landmine twist, that Russian twist standing with a barbell was so effective for just getting some exposure, some side flexion. And then you come from gymnastics where you're, like, what do you mean you can't rotate? Like, this is like, that's the game. And for us, I think we've taken it for granted that you're going to be exposed. Like we are exposed so much to rotation and have for decades now that it's not a big deal to train there. So, but I can see how it's a revelation for people for the first time. They're just like, I haven't rotated or shown any control with rotation. It's really
Absolutely
amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, you're exactly right. Whitewater paddling is like, you have to stuff yourself in totally uncomfortable boats and positions. The same we did quite a bit of outrigger canoe paddling as well. And what you learn in those sports is that like your arms actually aren't really even involved. You could just do the entire thing. Like you could literally just like brace your arms into straight positions and actually your paddle stroke would be more effective, right? The entire thing is rotation. So you're exactly right.
Give us an example of something that you guys would do in training that was specific out of the water that was training for something like that.
Jeez.
Or was there anything, or was all in water training?
Some of the classic rows rowing position, like bent over, dumbbell row, things like that was regular exposure. What I would say is that something that I didn't have to train very often, particularly since all I was doing pulling one side. And you go out and pull for 400 hours on one side. It's unnecessary to train more, except to make sure that, are you strong in that position? Are you trained that position? What I will say though, is in the winter seasons, when I haven't paddled a little bit, I go back and we'll jump on our stand-ups, or, go on a race or something. And all the muscle memory is there, and all these more formal movement patterns are there. And I can wreck myself. I'm like, oh, those are my obliques. Welcome back. Like, it's really a kind of a problem to have all this muscle memory and then go smoke myself on muscle memory. But if you realize how much you can work it in the warm-ups, it's something I expose my daughters to all the time, but they're playing water polo and rotating. So if you have a rotational athlete, like our kids throw with the right hand predominantly, I make sure that there's plenty of rotation to the left side. So it's something I think you really need to be aware of. And at least there are so many ways, even like, as you said, in the app, the Powder Monkey app, just tempo windshield wipers, just showing control with a long lever position, rotating from the bottom down. We started doing a lot of single leg toes to bar, like a single leg scissor pike. I don't know. I'm sure there's an actual term for that, but at least we can start to see some rotation be expressed, not just in top down, but also bottom up as well. So I think you have to be aware of it, but I would say that in our training, we didn't have to do a lot of it.
Well, and I'll take this down 10 notches. What I would say is, I was both a rower at Cal and then a professional whitewater paddler in the 90s, which I truly feel like was the dark ages of training. I mean, we were so unsophisticated in terms of our training and nutrition back then. I mean, I actually look back and think like, oh my God, we could have been so much more awesome. So much more awesome. So, we were not consciously doing any rotational training. I mean, we were strength training, but it was very standard, boring stuff and like 24-hour fitness kind of strength training. I mean, it was really unsophisticated. And it's been so interesting to be part of this movement for 20 years where, I mean, just the amount of information and sophistication that's come into our space. I look back and think, man, if I could apply that to my 20-year-old body, like it would have been a different world.
Oh yeah. We do the same thing. Chad and I talk about that all the time too. I'm curious. Some of it is like just access that information and then convincing your 20-year-old self that it's valuable to actually do. Like if I'm in college, the amount of shit that I was eating at 2 a.m, like, am I going to change that because I know, hey, fueling your body correctly throughout, going to college parties is going to be imperative for you to be able to maximize your trade. The information and the implementation are two that would be critical.
Yeah. You bring something up though. I think is really important, is that we need to make sure we know who the audience we're speaking to. So if you have college athletes, so we are working with a team at Cal Berkeley. Just watch Stanford beat them in water polo, just so you know. It was very upsetting.
Go card.
But I was talking to those coaches. I talked to a lot, but I was also talking to the UCLA coach there, women's coach. And he was saying just that we're now seeing that everyone is training as hard as anyone else. There some secret school program where you're doing crazy. That doesn't exist. Everyone's limits.
You really can't outwork anyone anymore.
But you can have better coaching and better athletics, better athletes recruited, and better genetics. Like that's true. But where we see is a real opportunity is to who can adapt to the training volume the most effectively, who can be the freshest and handle those higher volumes repeatedly and then show up fresh. Right. That is the difference. And he and I were laughing. He's like, when I was 19, he's like, I don't even think I ate. I think I just ate some ramen in the evening and then just swam all day. And he's like, you could cut off my hand and it would regrow like I was a salamander.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that, when we talk to 19 and 20-year-olds about injury prevention, they're like, what? I don't, I mean, even you, Chad, with some of the we'll call it early mobility, you were like, what are you doing? Why don't you just lift, and why don't you expose yourself to these ranges of motion? And so I think when we're telling young people this, we have to just say it's about performance. So we can get more wattage. You think you're working hard, but you can actually work harder. And we think we can get more work done. And then they're like, oh, I'm in. I can work harder and recover better. And then there's a whole bunch of us who are like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never getting hurt again. Like, what was it you were saying? Because I'm never going down that path. Right. Or there's the final category, which is I can't do my job or my sport. What is it you were saying? And there's plenty of athletes we run into who come to us after their second knee injury. They're like, we got it. Okay. Maybe we don't. Okay. What was that you were saying? Because I can't do this again. Right. It's going to cost me my career. So, again, either performance or on the other side, there was one of the athletes I was working with yesterday. She's like, I was like, how old are you? She's like 21. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, but I feel like I'm 50. And I'm like, you have no idea what you just said. I'm 50. Like, you don't know what it feels like.
I wanted to, we kind of jumped right in here, and I want to go back a step and just give the listeners a little bit of a background, because you guys have been around the community, as long as anyone, and you've had so many different roles. And I would love to talk really briefly, just to give the listeners some perspective about the gym ownership side, because you guys owned San Francisco CrossFit for years. It was one of the mega hubs within the CrossFit community for over a decade. We actually had Carl Paoli on the podcast last week, and it was good to reconnect with him a little bit. And he chatted a little bit about his experience with you guys. And you not only created a hub of excellence with bringing specialty in, which I think you guys were one of the first to do with Carl on the gymnastics side and the movement side. You guys on the importance of mobilization, starting MobilityWOD, and then you had Diane on the weightlifting side. You had so many experts in one spot that you really were at the forefront of not just GPP, but also appreciating the benefits of saying, let's become really technically proficient of all of these areas. Was that done with intention, or did these other coaches kind of fall into your lap, being that they were kind of close by? I'm just curious kind of what the intention is with that initial creation of the gym.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was twofold. I mean, I think, they originally found us and started training with us as athletes. And I think our role in it was seeing that they had potential to be coaches and appreciating their unique skills. But I think what we did that was important was that we created a space for them to be experts and didn't find their expertise to be threatening towards what we were doing, which I think would stop that sort of, thinking and expansion. We created a space for them to be the experts and run their own businesses under our banner. I think that was a really big thing. We talked to a lot of CrossFit gym owners over the years who's like, well, how do you do that? Like, they're competitors and that's weird. And they're running their businesses under your banner. And we just really didn't see it that way. Everybody was in their lane. Like, we were like, hey, we're in the mobility lane. So, please don't come into that lane. Like, that's kind of our side lane. But, Diane was Olympic lifting. Carl was gymnastics. We had a guy, Nate Helming, who was endurance and running. And they all were running their own businesses under our banner. And we supported that. I mean, partly because it's so hard to make a living as a coach, as we all know, as is, just without some other form of side income. So we wanted to support them being able to be entrepreneurs and run their own businesses and also make a living being a professional coach. And then the benefit to us was that we had this amazing sort of think tank and, tons of expertise and innovation going on at our gym all the time. And then our members just got the benefit of these amazing, really epic coaches. I mean, those coaches are, some of the best. Like, if you could show up at a CrossFit class with Carl, Diane, Nate, Kelly coaching you, like, those are going to be among the best run classes you could go to. Even to this day, even though, most of us aren't actually coaching anymore.
It is true that each one of those people came to us and they're different. Like the first day I pulled Carl aside and I was like, well, who are you? What is this?
Yeah. Like, we could see immediately. We were like, oh, okay. Yeah. They're special.
The original tenet of CrossFit. And I think it's difficult to filter through what we know about CrossFit now and sort of how accepted it is, but it was to become a generalist and a really savage generalist. And some of us, the first day I ever did gymnastics, I did a whole day of gymnastics at the CrossFit cert. We did CrossFit. It was a 3-day cert. We did Roger Harrell was coaching. I did so many gymnastic skills and I had a whole huge chunk of a whole day of Olympic lifting. And I think early on it was impressed upon me that I needed to become proficient in basic tumbling and gymnastics like skills. I'm not talking about gymnastics, just like I would only even think the average CrossFitter could be a level 1 gymnast. You know what I mean? The average typical. But if we could be building those skills to moving towards there, front roll to straddle, I mean, just that kind of thing that didn't exist. And then simultaneously, when someone like Carl came in, we were very exposed to a whole sort of history of movement skills. Like Carl had 10,000 gymnastic skills that he'd learned from the national team, et cetera, et cetera. And then he was translating them into CrossFit skills. And so for me, imagine just being a coach there and running my physio practice and doing my thing. And I'm just listening to Carl coach for years and years and years. There's a lot of times where it was just Diane Fu and me at the gym, and I'd have my door open and Diane would listen to me treating patients and I would listen to her teaching Olympic lifting, especially this Chinese style Olympic lifting. And holy moly, I mean, just, if I could say one thing to someone, find some good coaches and then just have an excuse to be in the room with them while they actually coach, you'll learn more than you can possibly imagine. So just keep magnifying that times these experts who are coming in. And Juliet's right. It felt special at the time and pretty extraordinary.
I love that. And I think that's one of the things that we always kind of feel grateful for within Power Monkey is the synergy that comes along with the expertise that, we're in a room with me, Chad, Hinshaw, Martone, Lindsay is Olympic gold medalist on the rowing side, and all of these people that come from their own individual spaces. And instead of just having their own blocks where they kind of do their thing and create great content and great education, is we figure out how they can help each other, right? And so you're becoming a better coach because you spent some time listening to the way Diane teaches or whoever else. It's such a unique way to be able to translate other specialties into your own and grow some education around it. And I love that. And I think that you guys kind of were at the forefront of creating that type of an environment. Now, finishing off that conversation is, I was lucky enough to be on the Ready State podcast recently, and thank you again for having me on. It was awesome to chat you guys a little bit. And we talked a little bit about the gym ownership side and talking about the gym closing during pandemic. And there was almost a sense of relief. And I was just a little curious about whether or not the sense of relief, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, if I'm just kind of interpreting things, but if it was because you were so pulled in different directions, what you're doing with Ready State and how busy you are, or if being a gym owner is just taxing in ways that for the long term, it's really challenging to be able to be as present as you need to be. What kind of led to you guys eventually closing the gym down, and how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we felt very sad about it because I think, leading up to it, we definitely had a lot of conversations, at our dinner table about like, how long do we want to do this? Like
16 years,
at the time of the pandemic, we still had a full 3 or 3.5 more years on our lease. Did we want to sell it? Did we just want to close it? Like, did we want to sign another 5-year lease? Like, that was definitely a dinner table conversation because when it was all said and done, we owned it for almost 17 years. And that's a long time to own a business of any type.
And even if just to interrupt, I mean, sometimes the conversation is like, wouldn't it be nice to have some fresh legs? I mean, how many opens did we host? How many Christmas parties did we host? Like being the center of a community and the anchor, the third place for so many people in San Francisco is a lot, and all of the other things that go along with that. But just point out, but keep going on.
Yeah, well, but I would say it's in some ways hard to answer that question because I will say from the day that we closed or were required to close in the pandemic to the day that we officially closed the gym, not to be overly dramatic, but I mean, I felt like I was like laying on the ground being kicked. Like that's how gnarly it was. And I know anyone who's listening to this, who's a gym owner can totally relate to that. I saw all these people in the pandemic who were like, I'm home baking bread and not really working. And, basically the day that the pandemic hit, I went to working, 7 days a week. And for the 9 months that we stayed open during the pandemic, I worked every single weekend. My kids are like, hey, Mom, you're working again on a Saturday. So it's like I went from having, running 2 businesses to like running working literally 7 days a week, like no balance, deep stress, really worried. Like I have a very mom-like instinct when it comes to my employees. And I consider my foremost obligation, and I take super seriously the fact that the thing that I'm doing is paying people's mortgages, their health insurance, their kids. Like I take that the most seriously of anything I do, that like I'm personally responsible for other humans' livelihoods. And so to see that start to go away, and we're trying to pay people salaries, and, just, it was a struggle bus times 10. So it's hard to say, because by the time we did close in November, so we stayed open for 9 months, and like open is in air quotes. By the time we did close, I mean, we were just psychologically, emotionally, physically exhausted, and like ready to say, okay, we can't do that anymore. So it's really hard to say how long the gym would have stayed open without those circumstances. I can tell you that we had the most members, the most clients. It was the busiest. It was rocking. We had a really great cohesive staff.
It was making the most money.
It was making the most money it had ever made, so, I mean, it was rocking and rolling. And we had, we certainly had at least 3 more years to go, because we had 3 more years on our lease at that point. So it's really hard to say, how it would still, I mean, we would still be within that window. San Francisco CrossFit would still be open today without that whole situation. But yeah, so it's hard to really totally answer that, because I think going through that 9 months before we closed was such a hell on earth that that's where the relief comes from. But the community part, I think we miss a lot. Like that's sad. And we loved our staff, and, felt very like, protective of them. So, we're obviously still in touch with all of them, but it was sad.
We treated it like a teaching hospital and a test kitchen simultaneously. So it was a place to iterate and practice and develop, and like you guys point out that, if you're working alongside coaches with them, you can't help but be influenced, and you see the synergies. And that was always the place. And, while, hiring millennials and having very special gym members who are always super special and high touch. And we were, owning a gym, and I think our rent was just $25,000 a month, for that space. That's a big nut. So, in lieu of all that, to get that started from scratch and to carry that history there, it was really extraordinary place. We didn't have to win anyone over, and there was a lot happening there. It was fun. It was in a beautiful place. We had parking and showers and a bathroom. I mean, like the high things, but simultaneously, it really was gnarly at the end. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows, but I developed the hiccups for 11 days because I burned a hole in my stomach from the stress. And so I, was disabled. I had like 6 hiccups a minute for 11 days. I lost a whole bunch of weight and didn't sleep. And that was just from the reflux, from just the stress of trying to keep people fed and keep the place open, and, the uncertainty. We didn't get any help from our landlord. So we were closed, couldn't even access the building, but we'll take your $25,000. So that happened. Goodness. And so
I'll give you a little like, thing that makes my head tilt to the side all the time. So we were in the Presidio of San Francisco. That's where San Francisco CrossFit was, which is a national park. So our lease was, like 5,000 pages long, and was literally between the United States of America and Kelly and Juliet Starrett. Our landlord was the United States of America. Wow. So it was a little bit of like a weird mind trip that we're like, the United States of America is closing your gym. You're required to be closed, which I understood, by the way. I got it. Like I understood the reasons, but you're required to be closed by the same entity who's like, but you're still going to be required to pay this $25,000 a month in rent.
That's crazy.
So it was just like such a head scratcher for me, right? When that's your, like it just didn't all add up. You'd think like if there was any landlord who was going to cut a small business a break, it would be the United States of America. But it was not.
And something that I think is crucial is that any of the programming or thinking we do, we always think at an individual level, what's the hyper local level? Where is someone going to do this? In their garage. Okay, we can think, how do we make this simpler so that someone can do this in their living room, their garage? But also, we're always thinking about that gym level organization, that gym level environment. like you, Chad, I've taught at your gym. You know, I drank 3 gallons of water and went through 5 shirts, and
At least, yeah.
it was at least. And, you know, that perspective of how do we solve the problems we see of the average typical person, you know, there is no average person, but a person coming into the gym, what problems does the coach see, and how do we help solve the problems in the gym environment? So there's none of this without the gym, without that context and just exposure. I don't think we would have the sort of ability to understand what people need and where to deliver that at all.
I appreciate the honesty on all of this. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, no two people got more out of a gym. We're very fortunate. I mean, the gym it served us very well.
It was such a special place.
Well, like I said, I appreciate the honesty there. And for all the gym owners out there that are listening, I'm sure they can appreciate going through their own challenges with COVID and being able to come out on the other side, and hopefully continuing to find that love for being able to work with people in person. But it's allowed you guys to now move into what you're doing with Ready State, and what I think we can spend maybe the rest of the time on talking about your new book, because I think there are so many pieces in here that are worth discussing and worth diving into a little bit more deeply. The book is right there behind you on the shelf for all the people who are able to see some of this, but Built to Move. Thank you for sending it. And I wanted to go over a couple of things in here. It's basically meant to, what you guys put in quotes as, to rewild the body, correct? And to maybe take some of the things that you put forward in becoming Supple Leopard and some of the other things you put over time, and make it a little bit more available in a universal tone, something that goes beyond just mobilizations, and take it into what you can be doing on a daily basis from a variety of different areas to become a more capable human being. Can you just give us some insight into why the book? What was the purpose for you guys in terms of writing this one, and what's the intention behind just the general theme?
Oh, I'll let Kelly start with that one, but I think just to sort of fully connect this to our conversation about the gym and what you said is, you're so right. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it is sort of like when one door closes, another door opens. And the backstory is, we actually were approached by who is our now agent almost 5 years ago. And we had started talking about this book then. But we just didn't have the space to even think about, writing another book, marketing another book. Like, we just didn't have the mental, emotional, actual time in our days to do it. And it was really interesting because our gym closed, and he actually reached back out, not because our gym closed, he just reached right back out. And so it was just really interesting timing that the gym closed, and we sort of all of a sudden found ourselves with a little bit of extra time and space to be even able to sort of put this together and start thinking about it. But I'll let you answer the why this book now.
Let me set this up for those people who are coaches. If you're listening, I would teach a million years ago, would teach the 5:30 a.m. Sort of our like advanced games, people who are games competitors or regional competitors has aspirations that would come, and we'd get there very early. And I'm, as a coach, presupposing a lot that person is ready to take on the volume, the intensity, the training, the meticulous organizing and skill transfers I've set up, the brilliance of my perfect hour session, warm up, cool down, timing the music, all of that. Right. And literally, when we'd ask people, well, did you eat any breakfast? No. Did you eat any dinner? No. What'd you have for dinner? Peppermint patties. And I'm super stressed, and I can't touch my toes. And I'm like, all right. And you slept 6 hours or less, and we're going to snatch in the next 20 minutes like this, So as a microcosm, what you realize is that when someone comes into the gym, they're coming in because they want to change body composition, or they know they exercise, or the community, or they want to learn a skill, right? But as a coach, you get to have lots of conversations about the care and feeding of the body. And one of the things that we started to see more and more was that we had taken for granted a little bit of that people had a basic operating system of how to create a readiness so that they could get the most out of their training. And that was training independent. And simultaneously, so we're kind of confronted with, hey, we need to talk about nutrition and downregulation and your sleep and how are you recovering from these workouts and all of these things. Because when we're in the gym, we're talking about the best way up Everest, or different routes up Everest, or what tools we're going to use, or it's very technical, very specialized, nuanced conversations. how much volume, blah, blah, blah. But simultaneously, we see that people don't even have a skill set or reference for what they should be able to do. So we see the pandemic come up. And one of the things we recognize right away is that people are starting to get comfortable with this idea of vital signs, that they know what their SaO2 is, they know what their respiration rate is, they know what their temperature is. And people are starting to, track resting heart rate. And we see that people are getting very sophisticated with understanding some of the vital signs of their physiology. Okay. So now we take another lens, and that lens is, we have always believed that one of the reasons we love to spend our time in high performance environments, right? The Eagles are one of the teams we work with. The Niners are one of the teams we work with. For example, this year, we have seen and get to go behind the scenes of a lot of really, really excellent athletes and organizations. And what we realize is we've always treated those places like a laboratory, a living lab, where we could say, here are the best practices or good practices that we see that people can be consistent. And here's what makes the underpinnings of high performance. So how do we take what we're learning in high performance sport and actually transform our communities with that fundamental knowledge? So simultaneously, we're at the pointy end. We're seeing people aren't doing what they need to do to prepare for our training. We're seeing the pandemic left us really unprepared to how to eat and move and cook and deal. And then simultaneously, we're working in these high performance environments. And so what we came out of that was this practice. And again, Juliet and I are turning 50 this year. And we're seeing that in our community at large, people are very confused about what to eat and how to move and what's the minimum. It looks like if I don't own a Peloton and I'm not keto, I'm failing. I mean, really is very confusing for people about where to start in their health. And if we track anything you care about, diabetes, obesity, depression, injury, I mean, like substance abuse, you see that 100% of them are going the other direction. So out of all of those sort of maelstroms of seemingly confusion, we realized that if we could do a good job of creating a simple template, 10 vital signs, physical practices to give people objective measures, not subjective, like there are clear objective measures here, then we could begin a conversation about what it meant to feel better and to have more movement choice, and then give people the basis so they could go on and layer on top of that whatever it is they cared about. So that is really what Built to Move is about.
And I would just add two things. I mean, what we've seen, we've seen the fitness industry, of which we are all a part, get a lot of things wrong. And that's part of the reason why all of the general metrics of health across our country are going, they're not going well, as Kelly said.
We didn't have enough Liver King.
But I think, those of us that are in this business think that most people might care about getting shredded or, improving their snatch or whatever.
No, heating snatch
Turns
balance,
out
obviously.
that nobody except for 0.01% of us care about that stuff. Most people just don't want to be in pain. They want to be able to do really basic stuff. And basic stuff can really vary. I mean, basic stuff can just be able to like walk around with your grandkids or do a triathlon when you're 55 years old. I mean, it's really like people's own movement goals are wide ranging, but we've really, missed the mark in terms of thinking people care about things that they actually don't really care about and don't improve their quality of life in actually many ways. And I think the other lens at which Kelly and I have looked at this is that, we're obviously deep in the CrossFit space, fitness space. We have been for 20 years. Like, this is what we live and breathe. We're wearing Oura rings. We optimize our sleep with our chili pads, and like, we're super sophisticated about everything we do. But we also live in a normal suburban community, and we have 2 kids, and we're raising those kids. They're doing youth athletics. Most of our friends are not in, at least in our community, are not in the fitness business. And both with our friends, our personal friends, and then our community at large, people have really looked to us for general health and fitness advice. I mean, we don't go hiking on our trail with someone stopping us to say, hey, what do you think about this? And should I do this? And should I do that? And what we've learned from those conversations is that, man, people feel fire hosed with information. They have no idea what to do. They have no idea what diet they should follow. They don't know what type of exercise they should be doing, how much. And on top of that, no one has literally ever told them how to fit it into their lives, which don't look like the lives of most fitness professionals. You know, the people that we talk to might have one discretionary hour between working and raising their kids to do some stuff. And if you say, well, you know, you need to do an hour of balance practice, and then, you know, you need to
Meal
make
prep.
sure you meal prep for 5 hours on a Sunday, and you need to, you know, like we just lose people. And so I think it was this sort of cross perspective Kelly and I have from being in this business, but also sort of having this outside perspective that we are like, how can we, you know, reach people in a way and give them these vital signs that they can sort of figure out how to stack and incorporate into like a normal busy life, where people have too many things on their to-do list. So I think that was just the sub motivation here.
Yeah, I saw Juliet describe this book as a prequel to everything else we've read.
Like a prequel to Supple Leopard.
There you go.
Episode 1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's
No,
right.
You're absolutely right. It's as you were saying, describing that. I can just remember conversations that I've had with people outside of our community. I mean, most of the people I talk to are in our community, so like it's easy to lose or to forget that, you know, a quote unquote normal person, or I say normal, but a person outside of the fitness community doesn't really know any of these things. It's a really, really good reminder, because I can just remember conversations that I've had recently or through the years with my family that are not necessarily in the fitness community.
That's
I'm
right.
like, how do they not know this one simple little thing? I mean, I know all these things from being in the fitness community, and it's just, I'm just saying it's such a good reminder that most people, like you said, most people, 99 point something percent, aren't really in the fitness community. They don't know these basic things. And I want to go ahead and get into some of the specifics. I mean, there's all 10 of the points that you guys have listed there. I'd love to dig in. We don't have time for that, but I'd love to dig in and ask questions on all of those. But I want to just pick a few out, and I want to ask them in reference to what you described. I think this book is mostly for maybe those people that are outside of the fitness community, or they're in the fitness community, but they're not deep into it. They don't, if I say, do you want to snatch 200 pounds, they're not going to raise their hand. They don't really necessarily care about that. They just care about being healthier and out of pain. And so when I think about the list of these 10 things here, and I'll just go down to hip and hamstring mobility right now. Why are the hamstrings so important that you put them in this list of 10 things for a non-athlete? So let's go with hamstrings, and then let's go with hip. Why is it important for them to do things to keep them moving and mobile?
Let me start by saying, keep in mind that we give this book to a lot of our world champion friends, and we said, have a go at this. Now, what do you think? And they said was, oh, I picked up one or two things that made it so that I could work harder. So if you're an athlete, these are base camp behaviors off of which you can handle more volume and actually work harder and recover faster.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let Kelly answer the hamstring question, but you know, we've actually given this to tons of athletes and people in the fitness business, and most people aren't getting a 10 out of 10. You know, most people are getting like a 6 or 7 out of 10. Right. So what we're finding is that people are like, yeah, you know, I'm doing these things, but I actually really am missing these things. And this was such a great reminder, and I'm going to be adding
I don't
these
eat
into
fruits
my
and
practice.
vegetables.
Yeah. So I think you're right. Like, we really want to cast a wide net here and start to invite more people into a conversation about what it means to be healthy. And then we think also there is a place, you know, there's a place in this book for even people in the fitness community as well.
So yeah, for sure. And let me just say, I did not intend to take away from that.
No.
I was going to come back around to that, because already just the first one sitting on the floor, I'm going to start sitting on the floor more. Yeah. You know, and
so
I'm an elite athlete. You know, I know that there are many things that I'm going to take from this book, but I think it's easier for those athletes or the people that are in our community to take to something like this. Like, that's going to me, that's going to be automatic, because they're looking for basic things that they're missing more so now than ever. I mean, back 10 years ago, maybe that's different. Maybe they're completely skipping over the basics.
But I think you're right. I mean, the question is like, why should someone who's not in our community or an elite athlete like care about hamstring mobility? I mean, it's a great question.
Well, what we've, you know, the Ready State and BASL, I think, was misunderstood, because we had clear objective measures in there. And those objective measures are quantifiable, and they're called native range of motion. In order to Olympic lift or do gymnastics, you don't actually have to have supranormal flexibility or range of motion or whatever you want to call it, mobility. You have to have baseline skills. And it would be useful to have a little bit more in some of the extreme things that you do, Dave. But for Olympic lifting, you actually aren't required to have extraordinary supernormal range of motion, just standard range of motion.
Yep.
So BASL is always based on skills and tools to restore people to native ranges, the range that every physician, orthopedic group, American Academy of Pediatrics, physicians, physical therapists, everyone agrees your shoulder should do this. Mm-hmm. So what we really were saying is, hey, let's come back and do that. And our piece around that, then the hook was always biomotor output. If we could get you back to more native ranges, your natural, normal range that you're born with, then suddenly we realized that you could have more movement choice and you could work harder and develop more force. So that objectivity carries right into this idea of the vital sign. But instead of a physiologic vital sign, we have behavioral vital signs. So it's not about hamstrings. It's about your hamstrings are a component to hip flexion, to sitting on the ground, to having movement choice. And if we're going to, some of the behaviors in the book are very geared towards sleep. There's a vital sign around sleep. Here's a good or bad sort of a reference position. You can drink all you want and stay up and binge, but at least you're like, hey, I'm above or below my vital sign. But what we found with range of motion was no one was actually putting a line in the sand and saying, hey, let's start to become more curious if you're struggling to do this. So getting up and down off the ground cross-legged is a really simple hip range of motion task. And it's not about strength. Look at children doing it. Children aren't very strong, but they can get up and down very easily. But it does highlight if you're missing crucial aspects of your ability to move in your environment. And by creating a vital sign there, then it gives people permission to say, oh, hey, that was easy. Oh, maybe I don't need to work on it. Or, hey, I struggled with that a little bit. What are some easy components to begin and expand a conversation about restoring my ability to move the environment? And what we've seen is we've gone hyper crazy on counting macros and some of these other things in the world. People are wearing continuous glucose monitoring, but they don't have a vital sign around how much hip extension they should have. And what we found was that one of the easiest ways that we could make people feel better who are struggling with pain or after injury was to actually just restore them to native ranges, just give them more range of motion towards what they should be able to do. And sometimes that was enough to change their experience of pain or change how they moved in their environment or restore some aspect of their physiology through that, because suddenly your quads are a little more effective because you have hip extension and your knee doesn't hurt. So I think the reason people should care about their hamstrings, the hamstrings turns out to be a really low kind of piece of fruit to improve to help someone move through their environment more effectively. But now we have a vital sign in flexion. We have a vital sign in hip extension. We have a vital sign of internal rotation of the shoulder. We have a vital sign of overhead. We've snuck these key elements of crucial ranges into really simple, understand behaviors. And I think that is what's so sneaky. This book is subversive and sneaky. There are so many isometrics in here, programmed in here. Yay. Like, hold on to your butt. You're going to have to do a lot of gnarly work, but it's under the guise of something you can wrap your head around, like sitting on the floor.
Well, and I would just add that from a practical perspective, one of the things that we ask people to do, I think about this book like a 401k. And, in our normal lives, if you guys run a business, everybody's like setting goals in their lives, right? You save money for your retirement. You set, you're like, I'm going to do my vision and my 5 and 10 year goal planning, goal setting for my business, but nobody's doing that for their health. And I can tell you the two things people care about as they get older are, one, everybody's hoping that they can keep their mind intact and, be coherent as they get older. But secondarily and primarily, everybody wants to be able to continue to move. If you ask anybody, what do you want to be able to do when you're 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, regardless of whether you're an athlete, people will say, I want to be able to like go for a walk with my grandkids, or, if you're an athlete, like Kelly and I, one of our physical goals is like, we still want to be able to ride our mountain bikes when we're 75. Like that may be an e-mountain bike, but that's still, we want to be able to ride our mountain bikes on a trail. And, you know, what I can tell you, no one's goal is at any age is to be stuck in a skilled nursing facility, laying down, or like stuck in your lazy boy because you can't move. Like that's no one's goal. And nobody has ever said, hey, you know, in addition to planning for your retirement financially and, you know, setting your goals for your business or your professional life, like, hey, set some goals for your movement life. And, you know, caring about hamstring mobility and being able to get off the floor is like putting money in your 401k to be able to move when you're older. And now.
I love it. I love it. And I'm looking forward to digging into more of this. And a little bit of a side note here. One of the things that is killing me and has been killing me for years, and one of the challenges that I think we have, even though more and more people are, especially in our community, are aware of some basic things that they need to be doing to make changes. But one of the things that's really killing me is so many people, with all of this information that is out there, chalking things up to anatomy. It's my anatomy. So my hamstrings are tight because of this. So they are what they're going to be, and they're not going to change. My hips are retroverted, so I'm always going to have to walk with my toes turned out, or squat with my toes turned out. And I know you don't want to dig into that, but I'm just saying, it's like I can see a part of this, and maybe one of the challenges. I know a challenge for me in what I do is that anatomy thing, and maybe a challenge in some of this is going to be anatomy or genetics, and people having that argument or excuse to not dig in as much as maybe they would.
Well, and you'll see that we have, you know, in our squatting chapter, right? We have a squat in there.
Oh, you have the squat chapter. Okay.
We've got something in there.
I'm surprised it didn't get brought up already. Number seven on this list, squat a few minutes per week here. I'm surprised, Chad, you didn't bring that one up already.
Intended to I stayed away from that with purpose. So,
yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that we think is, you know, yes, there are some different aspects of people's physiology, but that doesn't mean you don't move through the world. That means you may reverse earlier in your range of motion. You may not be able to get stapled to the very bottom under a, 400-pound clean as effectively as Chad can get stapled under a 400-pound clean, right? And you can see how it's easy to create apologetics around range of motion. We can excuse things, because you can always excuse it. Well, my mom has this bunion and right. But if you start to apply that, then you can easily say, well, there's nothing I can do to change my blood pressure. And there's nothing I can do to change my body composition, or there's nothing I can do to change my sleep. There's nothing I can do to grow muscles because my dad doesn't have big muscles. So you see that the conversation sort of starts to fall apart a little bit. And what we realize as we come back into it is, we have a Tabata squat challenge. We have an old CrossFit-ism in there. For a lot of people who aren't squatting, we're like, squat to a chair, and then tomorrow squat to the chair twice, and then the next day squat to the chair 3 times. And we put that, that alone, doing 30 squats in a row, is going to murder people. We did a big project with Amazon the last couple of years, trying to help them use some computer vision to establish range of motion. They abandoned the project because it wasn't financially, they couldn't gamify it. They couldn't dance out of it. And so they just canned the whole thing. But some of the easy wins for people were walking 2 minutes a day. That was where the bar was. And I think it's easy for us to, appreciate, we're not having these nuanced conversations. Do you think a 12-degree turnout is appropriate? And meanwhile, people aren't doing any squatting. And our squatting, when we use it as a vital sign, even in the ready state, we're just saying hip crease below the knee, 90 degrees. Show us that you can squat to 90 degrees with control. And people can't even do that. And that's a mid-range position. That's used to a chair. That's you sitting on the floor. Those are very favorable to the person. So if you're having to do all kinds of human origami to hit these real mid-range vital sign positions, then it gives us a conversation about, I wonder what's going on there. And so now we can actually have the next conversation. And that's why these vital signs are actually very reasonable for people to hit. And if you're below that, so for example, we'll take sleep. We know that 7 hours of sleep and less is what we think is sort of minimum viability to be a really surviving rad human. That's survival. If you want to change your body composition, heal, grow, learn a new skill, get stronger, we really say it's 8 hours. And that is really well validated. But go ahead and have a baby. Go ahead and let's look at your sleep for the last few days, Dave.
Yeah.
You went to Wadapalooza and then you went to the Europe. And I guarantee if I cut you in half and count the rings right now, you are going to look like a starved, stressed animal.
Yes,
right.
Sir.
So, but what we know is that we are immensely tolerant. Our bodies will put up with so much crap for so long. But now you say, oh, I got some agency and control. Now I can come back because I've fallen below this vital sign. And I think that's really what we're trying to show people is if we just get them up to these vital signs, they'll be shocked at actually they can feel better in their lives.
Chad, if it's okay if I jump in real quickly.
Yeah, please,
I know
please.
we're coming close to our hour here, and if it'd be okay with you guys to stay on for just a couple more minutes because I want to go into a lot of these, but unfortunately for the last half hour, all I heard, Kelly, was that you work with the Eagles, and it pissed me off as a Giants fan, and I can't get over it. And I'm more upset.
He blacked out for a while.
That's all I heard for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah. You blacked out. You blacked out.
Yeah.
I worked
But
with the
can you
Giants
please offer working with the Giants because they've been the most injured team in the last decade. And clearly the Eagles have something on the Giants right now. So I'm going to put it out there to the ether to see if Kelly be willing to work with the Giants moving forward.
Shout out Mike Minnis.
Secondarily, we're talking a lot about the mobility side of these vital signs. And obviously that's an area of expertise for you guys. And you make a point in here to make a distinction between mobilizing and stretching. And I would like to kind of dive into that a little bit more because I think a lot of people think stretching is important, but can you dive into the differences between those and why mobilization is critical here, maybe from a verbiage or from a translation standpoint, but also what the distinction is between stretching?
Well, I'll let Kelly answer that, but I just want to thank you for asking that because, even though we've been talking about this for, 12 years, I think we've come to realize more recently that there's, again, speaking of confusing people in the fitness space, like mobility is a word that's tossed around everywhere these days. But most people, even in the fitness space, don't actually know what it means. So take it away, Kels.
Well, if we just use a parallel, if I said you need to lift a weight, what does that mean? That means different things to different people, right? You need some resistance training. Okay, what does that mean? There are a lot of tools and a lot of tactics and a lot of techniques. So stretching is a very non-specific term. And typically when people interpret that, they mean I fold over and feel some tension in my hamstrings for a few seconds. And then I've stretched. I've felt some tension. So it just must be that it's like a rubber band and I need to stretch this rubber band. The problem is, what was the goal? What was the clear range? What is the normal range for a human being in there? And did what you did, feeling tension in your hamstrings, because I can do that with deadlifts, did tension in your hamstrings change your range of motion? What was the objective measure, the test retest there? And what we see is that they often don't. That the thing that people are doing they know they should do it, I should stretch, doesn't, it's a non-specific term with non-specific behaviors and non-specific outcome goals attached to it. And it can mean a lot of different things. If I jump into a gymnastics program and stretch, you're going to see a ton of active control. You're going to see a ton of end range isometric control. You're going to see that obsessive working on these control at these end ranges. Some of that is always built in to a lot of the sort of elite programs we see, is that we could take this generic term stretching and we could kind of apply it and say, well, they're stretching, but that's not what we're seeing. Rolling up and down on a foam roller on your IT band for 30 seconds, that's not doing anything either. So what we see is a whole bunch of behaviors that don't sort of go anyplace. If I suddenly overload classic stretching positions, put some serious load into it, get my breathing involved, get my nervous system involved with some control, suddenly, and if I start to do that for maybe a couple minutes, I can make massive change in my tissue. People are always like, oh, stretching is only neural. Dude, it's always about giving your brain permission. But I'll tell you, there's been plenty of stiff athletes I've worked on whose quads had their quad stiffness had nothing to do with what their brains were giving them allowed. And that when we needed a severe set of tools to mobilize those tissues so that we could move closer to what the end goal, which is native range of motion. So for me, I want everyone to understand what we think when we say mobilize is that there's a whole collection of techniques active release technique, mobilizing with something heavy, could be contract, relax, foam rolling, could be gua sha, cupping. There's a whole lot of techniques involved that are tools to restore someone's native range of motion. And that's when we mobilize. We found that these mobilizations turn out to be what we call position transfer exercises. They're really effective at getting someone back to their native range of motion window. Should you then go use it? Yeah, you should use it. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. We're trying to create an opportunity where your brain and tissues can then let you do the thing you need to do. So that's why we are less fans of the word stretching. But if you love to go to stretch class and it works for you and you're engaged and you're doing very sophisticated, nuanced stretching, and it's working, great. But the only thing that matters is test, retest. Are you better, same, worse after your stretching thing? And what were your objective measures? What were you stretching to? Do you just get out and I just think about all the kids on the track, you get in a hurdler stretch, you just got to hang there and talk to your friends and check your phone. Nothing is being done. You're wasting your time.
Right. And you mentioned a few different methods to it. You already mentioned them here too. And one of the types of stretching mobilization recommendations that you seem to lean into is more of PNF contract release type techniques. One of the things that we've been implementing a lot with the DPTs that come to Power Monkey Camp and that we work with, and we've seen some good research around and have seen some benefits with the athletes that we work with, is using a lot of eccentric work around the muscle group in question, not just for strength building, but for mobility specific purposes, using 5-second tempo descents, 5-second pauses within those end ranges. Do you guys use eccentric work as part of those mobilization techniques as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what you should understand is that if you're going to have a tendon or a ligament or a tissue, like a muscle that you're going to load, you better load it isometrically, concentrically, and eccentrically. So one of the questions is, why do I have to program a whole bunch of eccentric loading into your musculatures? Are you not doing that in your programming? Turns out, maybe in gymnastics, you're not doing a lot of eccentric loading. I mean, really small eccentric loading, of course, and some of the shoulder and stuff, but look at really what's going on in the hips. If I come into your Olympic lifting course, turns out there's a lot of Olympic lifting eccentrics built into there, or can be. And so what you're absolutely right is that how am I addressing the stiffness? And there's a lot of ways to do that. So showing people control, it's one of the reasons we put kettlebell swings in all of our programming for our adults and for kids, is because we can get so much high repetition eccentric loading on the hamstrings and glutes there in a really safe, controlled way. It's basically Olympic lifting from the high hang. I mean, really, that's really what is so amazing about it.
Yeah, I think one of just the distinctions I want to make sure is made there is that you're seeing a lot of people use eccentrics, as you're saying, especially in the weightlifting world, but for strength building purposes. Like, we're going to use this to kind of load the body in a particular way, but using eccentrics specifically for mobility side. I think that sometimes gets lost, or maybe it's just kind of a secondary measure that people don't recognize the benefit of, saying we're using eccentrics here. Okay, maybe it helps with strength building around these particular positions, but it also has a very real effect on the mobility side of things too.
Yeah, for sure. If you it is a wonderful way to address tissue stiffness, is what we call tempo, is moving slowly through a range. And absolutely, there's really great ways to do that. Ultimately, we see that if you might need, depending on the athlete, some really gnarly, heavy eccentrics to do that. But just moving slowly through a range is a reason why tempo and isometrics are the root of all of the physical therapy practices on the planet. So if someone comes in injured or someone comes in tweaked, or we're rebuilding a program, we give them tempo first and we give them isometrics. And so it's not an accident that if you're working on a specific position, eccentrics are a form of tempo work. And all you're doing is slowing things down so people can make the connection, and giving all those muscle tissues a chance to connect and actually lengthen under tension. So it's crucial. Love it.
Love it. Chad, I got one more here. Is that all right?
Yeah, for sure. As long as they're good with it. Yeah.
I want to ask about balance on these 10, because balance is one of the 10 physical tools that you learn in your L1. You see it written up in a lot of CrossFit gyms, and it gets neglected. Balance in gymnastics is critical, and it's one that kind of gets swept under the rug way too much. And we're always promoting the idea of balance. We try to give balance exercises to our athletes all the time, and I loved seeing it in here as one of the vital signs here. And I'm curious for you, implementation of balance and purpose behind it. What do you see as easy ways for people to be able to effectively put balance into part of their training?
First of all, let me come from a performance side, and then I'll hand this to Juliet. Foot pressure is the game. Being able to press through the ground with a full foot jump is what we call it. That is what I learned from Olympic lifting. And it transfers to sports like skiing, and it transfers to sports like paddling. And where you need to be able to be balanced and know where straight up and down is, I'm sure jumping as high as you can probably matters where your foot is and what's going on in space. So keep in mind that we're first thinking about it, talking about it, because we saw that people didn't have good, strong feet and good foot control, and they didn't have a reference position. So balance is a skill. The question is, when and where are you doing that, and how do you program it?
Did you hear that, Dave? It's all about weightlifting.
Yeah. No, I want to say, can we talk about balance with regards to on your hands? We'll do that as a separate conversation.
Oh yeah. Like on your hands.
Same skill.
Yeah. Same skill. So, this story is actually in the book, but I'm going to share it. My mom is 78 years old, super fit, always moved her body, done things. But when she was in her mid 60s, she ceased to be able to ride a bicycle. Because she lost some amount of balance, and she just felt too unstable and no longer comfortable riding a bicycle. So as I mentioned earlier, one of my goals is to still be able to ride my mountain bike when I'm 75. And a key part of that is being able to retain that comfort and level of balance. And I think balance is one of those things that people realize, like they don't want to practice it. It's the first thing, as you mentioned, it's like, well, I have to, everyone's in prioritize mode. Like, what can I actually do? What can I fit in my life? And which thing can I cross off the list?
No, what gives me the biggest gains and
or whatever. And like
Yeah.
balance is always the one. You're exactly right. Like owning a CrossFit gym, whatever. That's like the first thing, like slash it off the list. No one's got time for that. Right. Like first thing to go. But it's also, to me, one of those things. It's like, it's like when you don't use it, you lose it. And when you lose it, it's like falling off a cliff. Like you had it one day and then you don't, and you're super bummed and it's really hard to get it back. And so, but what we also saw is that nobody is going to go to like a balance class. I mean, on top of all the other things they're doing. So the only way that regular people, and I'm even talking about like CrossFit people, that they're going to fit it into their life is if it's like balanced snacks throughout their day. And that's actually how we fit it into our life. I mean, we're lucky enough to do a couple sports like mountain biking and paddling where, balance work is built in, but we realize that the average person, including the average sort of what we call like light exerciser, which is someone who just goes to CrossFit or does the Peloton or whatever, they don't have time for that. They're not going to add it into their lives. And so what we figured out is, we just try to have these little things you can do throughout your day to practice balance that are things you're already doing. Like we are huge fans, as you guys know, because you work directly with him, of the old man test. It's in the book. Everybody, shout out to Chris Hinshaw. Yeah. Everybody's putting on their shoes and socks every single day. So we have said, hey, do the old man test every single day when you put on your shoes and socks. Yeah. And there you go. You've already gotten 2 minutes of balance practice. Stand on one foot with your eyes closed while you're brushing your teeth. I mean, I don't think people realize how impactful it is. Everyone's like, oh, I could easily do that. And then you close your eyes, you take the eyes out of the equation and balance, and you realize how challenging that actually is. We're huge fans of the Slack block. We have them like peppered all over our house. So, if we're sitting there like stirring the soup at dinner, if someone's standing on the Slack block, we have them all over our office so we can use them while we're standing at work. So we've just said, hey, look, like, this is critical, this balance piece, and it's totally overlooked and even overlooked by serious athletes. And how can we make practicing balance fun and easy to fit into our lives? And so that was kind of our goal with this chapter. I mean, we couldn't agree with you guys more. That's critical, but we were like, how can we program this in a way that people will actually do it on the regular?
You want to work on balance, go to a yoga class and see how much time you spend on one leg. You're going to be shocked at how much time you're on one foot doing different things. But what you're thinking to yourself is, well, if I'm in this 1 hour yoga class, when am I doing the rest of the training that I like to do? Right. And that's the problem with that. So again, it's easy in a weightlifting situation. We do a lot of just warm up sets, pressing, standing on one leg. It's so easy to just weave these things in, stiff legged, one legged, good morning. Come on. I mean, that's just balance practice, different ways, accessory work. So if you're clever, you can begin to put these things in. And what we find is that, again, coming from a high performance world, that if we had people who are more effective and improve their foot connection to the ground, their performance improved from the ground. And that may have been standing on a slack line, playing around, challenging foot position with a weight over my head, right? Jumping and landing on one foot. There's just so many ways to sneak this in, even jump roping on one leg. When I work with people who've had knee injuries, the first thing I do is I'm like, show me you can stand on that leg. And they are clear discharge from physical therapy, can't stand on one leg. And I'm like, wow, that's seems like that's a failure. Can you hop on that leg? And they're like, oh no. And I'm like, okay, so you're talking about, back squatting 400 again, but you can't stand on one leg. And so when we chase these fundamental positions, again, we give people more movement choice, and we see a sort of a irradiation of the whole chain.
Thank you for that, guys. I appreciate that balance component so much coming from the gymnastics world, it being an area that we focus on so much in the gym. My last question, I would love to have a part 2 with you so we can dive a little deeper into the rest of these. I have so many questions about each and every one of these, but the last question is, which one of these for each of you was the hardest to implement to your own daily lives? Of the 10, which one did you find to be the hardest to say, I can actually do this on a regular basis? Sleep, diet, mobility. Which one was for you hardest to implement?
I think for me, it's actually the breathing chapter. I loved Jacob Nestor's book, Breathe, and, that was super impactful on me. So I think that helped a little bit. But I'm not fortunately like a natural mouth breather. I usually breathe through my nose, so I have that benefit. But I think, I appreciate the extreme importance of it. And it's something that honestly, if I'm not consciously trying to work it into my life and into my walks and into my warm-ups, I actually just forget to do it. So for me, that's the hardest one to implement.
I mean, yesterday I just warmed up. Cal was playing Stanford, and we did, sort of exhale control laps in the gym. And then we did some monkey breathing where, we're trying to get the diaphragm firing. I mean, I put this stuff into everything we're talking about, and I am sort of obsessed because I've seen such a, I can now push like 90% of my max heart rate through my nose only breathing, which has been really fun. The thing I struggle with is actually getting enough protein every day and actually hitting that protein macro. I'm just under a lot. And we are huge fans of E.C. Sinkowski's 800-gram challenge of trying to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. And if I'm not conscious of it and sort of working towards it, oftentimes it's easy to like, whoops, haven't really had any micronutrients today except for my vitamins. And so those two fundamental practices for me have been really, really important. Awesome. And I feel better. My tissues feel better. Everything feels better when I get enough protein and when I eat more micronutrients.
All right. Well, I have a quick follow-up question to that, and I promise this is going to wrap everything up. I think this is the perfect way to end it. Dave talked about what were the hardest ones for you guys. Kelly, you mentioned time in there somewhere. You guys talked about simple things that people can implement into their daily routine, and I love that you have those suggestions. And I'm sure in the book you have a good explanation of how that can work. But I want you guys to envision that. Again, where somebody picks this book up, they're not necessarily a CrossFitter into the fitness world, and they see these 10 vital signs. They see 10 things that they can do on a daily basis to help improve those vital signs. Let's say that they're 0 out of 10. They're not doing any of them, and they fail all of them. How do you not overwhelm them with all 10 of those? And where do they start? Is there one of them that you say, hey, this is where you start if you're not doing any of them? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is always the challenge, and you guys understand being in the fitness space. It's like, nobody can just osmote fitness. You actually do have to do some things. You can't just like take the supplement and then just, be perfect. But
give me the pill, people.
So, what we've tried to do is say, hey, first of all, we've tried to make it super accessible. We sort of went into writing it thinking we're writing this for most people who have maybe one spare hour to sort of focus on their health a day.
So everything is built into where you're going to put this in your day.
Yeah. So we really did try to give people tools to like how you can actually fit these things into your day, and also fit them into things that we know people are already doing in their day, like watching Netflix and sitting on the floor as an example. So we did really think long and hard about how to make this as accessible as possible to busy people. I'm reluctant to choose one over the other, and it's actually our last chapter, but to us, and I don't know if it's our age or where we are in our life, but like none of this works without sleep. I think that to me is like the pinnacle. And again, appreciating that, people have children, and if you have children and they're little, then you like get a free pass on that for those years of your life and you can recover. But I think for me, sleep is the pinnacle of that. And all the other things, you actually can have mental and emotional space to even consider doing all the other things if you're well rested. And the moment you're not, then you're going to start to come up with reasons why you can't and feel overwhelmed and not even be able to press play on any of the other practices.
And these things all stack. I think that's one of the things that's unique about this, is that we actually show how all these behaviors conjoin and are synergists. So Juliet and I both agree that sleep is such an organizing principle. But one of the reasons we want you to walk more during the day is not to just decongest, but if you walk more, you'll actually create something called sleep stress, and you'll feel the need to actually fall asleep. One of the earliest and most important interventions we found working with elite military people who did not sleep was when they had sleep problems, falling asleep or staying asleep, we increased their step counts. So we pushed them up to 12 to 15,000 steps a day. They're exercising too, but they weren't moving enough to actually fall asleep or need to fall asleep. But that also means that if I'm thinking about my sleep, means maybe I cut my caffeine off at like 12 or 2. And it also starts to mean that, hey, if I mobilize in the evening, that makes it simpler for me to fall asleep because I had this soft tissue input. And so suddenly there's a whole host of, behaviors around here that make it easier for you to sleep, and then sleep begets all those other behaviors.
Awesome.
I love
Thank
it.
you guys for taking the time to answer that. Dave, do you have any last minute remarks here?
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is, well, thank you guys for the additional time too. I know how crazy busy you both are. Kelly, you've been on the past with us, and we asked this to everybody. So Juliet, this question is only for you. One word answer. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Weightlifting.
Oh.
Sorry.
You don't have to apologize. No need to
Love it
apologize.
or list it.
Sorry.
All right.
Well, with
right.
that, that's a perfect place to wrap it up, guys. We really appreciate you coming on. Always a pleasure to see you, and always just take so much good energy and knowledge from you, Kelly, and Juliet, you as well now. Also, you guys have any parting words? Where can folks keep up with you? Where can they get the book?
First of all, just thank you so much for having us. It's so fun to chat you guys up. And you can learn more about the book at builttomove.com. And you can find us at The Ready State. I'm at Juliet Starrett. I'm sort of like the home life behind the scenes Instagrammer. So those are the places you can learn more about the book and find us.
Well, what I heard is that you are the brains and the brawn, so you're the whole package. Forget about Kelly. So.
I describe myself as the broken anchor of the family. It's sort of useless dead weight. You need one, but you're not sure what you're going to do with it because it's broken.
I'm not sure that we can completely agree with that, but I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Well, to our listeners out there, as always, we very much appreciate you listening in. Go check out The Ready State. Go check out their book. You guys do such valuable work in the community. Really appreciate you for that. But also be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.